A day in the park. The summer sun was radiant, casting a golden hue over the sprawling city park. The annual summer festival was in full swing, bringing families and friends together in a celebration of joy and community. The air hummed with laughter, conversations, and the lively tunes of a local band. Stalls lined the pathways, offering everything from handcrafted trinkets to mouth-watering food, their inviting aromas mingling in the warm breeze. Children ran about with cotton candy in hand, their faces painted with colorful designs that sparkled in the sunlight. Among the crowd was 8-year-old Lily Morrison, a bright and spirited girl with sparkling hazel eyes and a contagious smile. Her wheelchair, decorated with stickers of her favorite animals and superheroes, rolled effortlessly over the gravel path as she took in the sights and sounds. Despite her physical challenges caused by spina bifida, Lily's enthusiasm was boundless. Her father, Agent Ryan Morrison, trailed behind her, his heart swelling with pride. Ryan, a seasoned FBI agent, rarely had moments like this with his daughter. His job often demanded long hours and unyielding focus, leaving little time for family. But today was different. Today was about Lily, her laughter, her happiness, and her freedom. He watched her wheel towards the playground, her face lighting up as she spotted the swings. "Daddy, can I go play?" Lily asked, her excitement bubbling over. Ryan nodded, his protective instincts momentarily subdued by her unbridled joy. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll be right here." Lily maneuvered her wheelchair toward the playground, weaving through the crowd. Ryan settled onto a bench nearby, sipping a cup of coffee. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, soaking in the vibrant energy around him. It felt like a perfect day, a rare reprieve from the shadows of his work. But perfection has a way of crumbling. As Lily neared the playground entrance, a shadow fell over her path. A tall man in a police uniform, Officer Mark Denton, stood blocking her way. His expression was hard, his posture imposing. Lily stopped, confused by the sudden obstacle. "Excuse me, sir," Lily said politely, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her chest. "I'm just trying to get to the playground." Officer Denton's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward, his tone laced with disdain. "This isn't a place for you. Go somewhere else." Lily blinked, her mind struggling to process his words. She had encountered unkindness before, but this was different. It wasn't just rude, it was cruel. "I just want to play," she said, her voice quieter now, but still resolute. Denton's lips curled into a sneer. "Did you not hear me, girl? Turn around and leave." Fear tightened Lily's throat, but she didn't move. "Why are you being mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Without warning, Denton's hand shot out, gripping the armrest of her wheelchair. He pushed it backward, jolting Lily. The gravel crunched beneath the wheels as she struggled to maintain her balance. Gasps rippled through nearby festival goers who had started to notice the altercation. Across the park, Ryan's sharp instincts sensed the shift in atmosphere. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on the familiar blue wheelchair. The sight of a uniformed officer looming over his daughter sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. He abandoned his coffee, bolting toward the scene. "Get out of here," Denton barked again, his voice rising in volume. "No." Lily shot back, her fear giving way to a flicker of defiance. She refused to let anyone make her feel small, even a man twice her size. Before Ryan could reach them, Denton's frustration boiled over. His hand clenched into a fist, rising in a threatening arc. The world seemed to hold its breath. "Hey!" Ryan's voice roared through the air, slicing through the tension like a blade. He closed the distance in seconds, stepping between Denton and Lily just as the officer's hand paused mid-swing. The crowd, now fully aware of the confrontation, began to murmur. Phones emerged, their cameras capturing every moment. Ryan's eyes burned with fury as he faced Denton. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice a mixture of outrage and controlled authority. He placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder, feeling her small body trembling beneath his touch. Denton straightened, attempting to regain control. She was in the way. He spat, his voice defensive. Kids like her don't belong here. The crowd's murmur turned to an audible gasp. Ryan's jaw tightened. He could feel the heat rising in his face, the rage bubbling just beneath the surface. Kids like her. He echoed, his voice dangerously low. What exactly do you mean by that? Denton's bravado faltered for a split second, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. You don't scare me. Ryan stepped closer, his towering presence forcing Denton to take a small step back. I'm not here to scare you, Ryan said, his voice sharp and unyielding. But you just assaulted a child, my child, and you will answer for it. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. The crowd watched, their collective outrage simmering as they recorded the confrontation. Lily tugged on Ryan's sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. Daddy, I'm okay. Ryan knelt beside her, his anger momentarily replaced by tenderness. He cupped her face gently, inspecting the tear-streaked cheeks that betrayed her fear. You're safe now, sweetheart, he murmured, his voice breaking slightly. I promise. Before Denton could respond, the sound of sirens pierced the air. 2 patrol cars pulled up, their lights flashing. Officers stepped out, their hands on their holsters as they assessed the scene. The arriving officers' eyes darted between Ryan, the crowd, and Denton. One of them, Sergeant Kelly, approached cautiously. What's going on here? Ryan stood, his posture commanding. This officer, he said, pointing at Denton, harassed and assaulted my daughter. I want to press charges. Kelly's face paled as she turned to Denton. Is this true? Denton's arrogance cracked, a flicker of panic flashing in his eyes. She was causing a disturbance, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. Ryan stepped forward, his voice steady and unwavering. You're going to take him into custody, and I'll make sure this doesn't end here. The crowd erupted in cheers and chants of justice for Lily. Their voices carried the weight of their collective outrage, filling the park with a powerful energy. As Denton was led away, his face a mix of anger and humiliation, Ryan turned back to Lily. He scooped her into his arms, holding her close as she buried her face in his shoulder. This isn't over, Ryan fought, his resolve hardening. He would fight for Lily, for her safety, her dignity, and her future. The battle for justice had only just begun. The storm begins. The following morning, the Morrison household was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the coffee maker in the kitchen. Ryan sat at the dining table, his laptop open, a deep frown etched on his face as he scrolled through the news. His hands, typically steady from years of FBI training, trembled slightly as he gripped his coffee mug. Lily's wheelchair squeaked softly as she rolled into the room. The bright smile she usually wore was absent, replaced by an expression of quiet thoughtfulness. Her cheek still bore the faint outline of the slap, a stark reminder of the previous day's events. She approached her father, who immediately softened at the sight of her. Good morning, sweetheart, Ryan said, his voice gentle. He reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. How are you feeling today? Lily hesitated, her small hands fiddling with the hem of her pajama top. I'm okay, Daddy, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, but the haunted look in her eyes told a different story. Ryan knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. Lily, he said firmly but kindly, you don't have to say you're okay if you're not. It's okay to be upset. Her hazel eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. I don't understand why he was so mean. Did I do something wrong? Ryan's chest tightened. How could he explain to his daughter that sometimes people acted out of cruelty and prejudice, that the world wasn't always fair, no matter how kind or innocent you were? He took a deep breath, steadying himself. You didn't do anything wrong, Lily. Some people, they're just mean because they don't understand how special you are. Lily's lips quivered, but she managed a small smile. Promise. I promise, Ryan said, pulling her into a gentle hug. As they embraced, Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and saw a flood of notifications. The video of the incident at the park had gone viral overnight. Clips of the confrontation had been shared thousands of times across social media, sparking outrage and calls for accountability. The hashtag Justice for Lily was trending, with messages of support pouring in from all over the country. Ryan picked up his phone and scrolled through the messages. Most were supportive, but a few were harsh, questioning the truth of the incident or defending Officer Denton. The public outcry was both a blessing and a burden. While it brought attention to the injustice, it also placed Lily and their family under an intense spotlight. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Ryan glanced at the clock. It was early for visitors. He approached the door cautiously, his FBI instincts kicking in. Peering through the peephole, he saw a woman holding a notebook and a microphone. Behind her, a cameraman adjusted his equipment. "Great," Ryan muttered under his breath. The media had found them. He opened the door just enough to speak but kept the chain on. "Can I help you?" The woman smiled politely, though her eyes gleamed with determination. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Lisa Carver from Channel 7 News. We'd like to speak with you about the incident at the park yesterday. Your story has captured national attention, and we want to help amplify your voice." Ryan sighed, torn between wanting to protect his family's privacy and recognizing the importance of publicizing the truth. After a moment, he replied, "Now's not a good time. Please respect our space." Lisa nodded, understanding. "Of course, Mr. Morrison. But if you change your mind, here's my card." She slid it through the crack in the door. "People want to hear your side of the story." Ryan closed the door, his mind racing. The media's involvement would undoubtedly escalate the situation, but it could also serve as a platform to demand justice. He set the card on the table, unsure of what to do next. Later that day, Ryan received a call from his lawyer, Anthony Vega, an old friend who specialized in civil rights cases. Anthony had seen the video and immediately offered his assistance. "This isn't just about one bad cop, Ryan," Anthony said over the phone. "This is about systemic issues. What happened to Lily is unacceptable, and we need to hold them accountable, not just Denton, but the entire department that enabled him." "I agree," Ryan replied. "But I need to make sure Lily is protected. I don't want her dragged through the mud in all of this." "We'll keep her as shielded as possible," Anthony assured him. "But the video is already out there. The best thing we can do now is control the narrative. If you're willing, we should speak at the rally tomorrow." Ryan hesitated. He wasn't one to seek the limelight, preferring to work behind the scenes. But this wasn't about him. It was about Lily and every other child who deserved to feel safe. "I'll do it," he said finally, "for Lily." The next morning, the square outside City Hall was packed with protesters, their signs calling for justice and accountability. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of anger, hope, and determination. Ryan stood backstage with Anthony, watching the crowd grow larger by the minute. Lily sat beside him in her wheelchair, holding a small stuffed animal for comfort. Despite her nervousness, she looked around with wide eyes, amazed by the number of people who had shown up for her. "Daddy, they're all here for me?" she asked. Ryan knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "They're here for you, and for everyone who's ever been hurt like this. You're helping make a difference, Lily." When it was time for Ryan to speak, he stepped up to the podium, his heart pounding. The crowd quieted as he adjusted the microphone. He glanced at Lily, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Thank you all for being here," Ryan began, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. "Yesterday, my daughter Lily, a bright, kind, and fearless little girl, was attacked by someone who was supposed to protect her. A police officer." The crowd murmured in anger, their faces reflecting his pain. "But this isn't just about Lily," Ryan continued. "This is about a system that allows people like Officer Denton to abuse their power. It's about a culture that makes my daughter feel like she doesn't belong, simply because of who she is. That has to change. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, their chants of justice for Lily echoing through the square. Ryan's resolve strengthened as he saw the sea of faces standing with him. As the rally continued, Ryan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight ahead would be long and grueling, but he knew he wasn't alone. Together, they would demand accountability, not just for Lily, but for every person who had ever been wronged. For now, it was enough to know that the first steps toward justice had been taken. The storm had begun, and Ryan was ready to see it through to the end. A community rises. The rally at City Hall marked the beginning of a movement, one that Ryan hadn't anticipated but now found himself at the center of. The footage of Officer Denton's actions and Ryan's speech reverberated far beyond their city. Social media channels were flooded with discussions, debates, and stories from others who had experienced similar injustices. The hashtag Justice for Lily continued to trend, and calls for reform in the local police department grew louder. Ryan sat at the kitchen table that evening, poring over emails, messages, and news articles. Lily was in the living room, watching her favorite cartoon, her laughter occasionally breaking through the house's tense atmosphere. It was a relief to hear her laugh again, but Ryan knew the road ahead would be anything but easy. The sound of a knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. He glanced at the clock. It was nearing 9 p.m. His first instinct was caution. Too much attention had been drawn to their family, and he couldn't be sure of people's intentions. He moved toward the door, peeking through the peephole. Standing on the porch was a small group of people holding candles. At the front was Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor who had always been kind to Lily. Behind her were several other neighbors, familiar faces from the community. Ryan opened the door, his guard still slightly up. "Good evening, Ryan," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice soft but firm. "We just wanted to let you know that we're here for you and Lily. What happened was horrifying, and it's time we stand together as a community." Ryan stepped back, allowing them to see his expression soften. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. It means a lot to know we're not alone." Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her face illuminated by the candlelight. "We've organized a vigil for tomorrow evening, right here in the neighborhood. It's not just for Lily, it's for every child who deserves to feel safe. We'd like you and Lily to join us." Ryan felt a lump rise in his throat. The overwhelming support was both humbling and empowering. "We'll be there," he said, his voice steady. The next day, the neighborhood buzzed with activity. Word of the vigil had spread quickly, and families began arriving as the sun set, carrying candles, flowers, and signs bearing messages of hope and justice. Children ran around, their laughter a bittersweet reminder of why everyone had gathered. The makeshift stage set up in the park was decorated with strings of lights, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Ryan and Lily arrived together, greeted by applause and cheers. Lily's eyes widened as she took in the scene, the crowd's energy lifting her spirits. She clutched Ryan's hand tightly as they made their way to the stage. When it was their turn to speak, Ryan helped Lily onto the platform, her wheelchair rolling smoothly up the ramp. The crowd quieted, their collective gaze focused on the little girl who had become a symbol of resilience. Lily looked out over the crowd, her small hands gripping the sides of her wheelchair. Ryan knelt beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you want to say something, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She nodded, taking a deep breath. Her voice, though small, carried with surprising strength. "Thank you for being here," she began, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "What happened to me was really scary. But my dad says we can't let scary things stop us from being brave." The crowd erupted into applause, some wiping away tears. Lily continued, her confidence growing. "I don't want anyone else to feel like I did. That's why we have to make things better. Not just for me, but for everyone." Ryan hugged her as the crowd cheered, their chants of justice for Lily filling the night. The vigil continued with speeches from community leaders, songs of unity, and moments of silence to honor those who had suffered similar injustices. Later that evening, as the vigil wound down, Ryan was approached by a man in his late 40s. He was dressed casually, but his posture and demeanor hinted at a background in law enforcement. He introduced himself as David Peterson, a former police officer who had left the force years ago. "Mr. Morrison, can I have a word?" David asked, his tone respectful. "Of course," Ryan replied, though his guard remained up. David glanced around, ensuring they had privacy. "I saw the video of what happened to your daughter, and it broke my heart. I left the police force because of people like Denton. The system protects them, even when they don't deserve it." Ryan studied David's face, searching for sincerity. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can help," David said. "I've seen how the department covers up misconduct. They'll try to discredit you, twist the narrative, and protect their own. But I know how they operate, and I'm willing to help you expose them." Ryan's mind raced. Having someone on the inside who understood the system's workings could be invaluable. But trusting a stranger, even one claiming to be an ally, carried risks. "Why now?" Ryan asked. "Why come forward now?" David's expression hardened. "Because I've seen too many good people destroyed by bad cops and a broken system. What happened to Lily was the last straw." Ryan extended his hand. "If you're serious about helping, I'm willing to listen." David shook his hand firmly. "I'm serious. Let's bring them down." Over the following days, David provided Ryan with insights into the inner workings of the police department. He revealed how officers like Denton were often protected by a culture of silence and a reluctance to hold their own accountable. David also provided documents and reports that hinted at a pattern of complaints against Denton, most of which had been quietly dismissed. Meanwhile, Anthony worked tirelessly on the legal front, filing a formal complaint against Denton and initiating a lawsuit against the department. The media frenzy showed no signs of slowing down, and Ryan carefully navigated interviews, ensuring the focus remained on Lily and the broader issues at hand. As the pieces began to fall into place, Ryan realized the fight was no longer just about Lily. It was about dismantling a system that allowed cruelty and prejudice to persist. The road ahead would be long, but with the community rallying behind them, Ryan knew they had the strength to see it through. For now, the Morrison family found solace in the overwhelming support surrounding them. But the battle was far from over. The true test of justice and resilience was yet to come. Behind the badge, the Morrison household had transformed into a hub of activity. Calls, emails, and messages poured in at all hours. Ryan's dining room table was covered in papers, documents, and printouts of social media threads. On one side of the room, a whiteboard displayed timelines, lists of contacts, and legal strategies. It was an impromptu war room, a battleground for justice. Lily sat nearby in her wheelchair, coloring a picture of a butterfly. She had been quieter than usual, her vibrant energy dulled by the weight of recent events. Ryan kept a watchful eye on her while juggling his growing list of responsibilities. Every few minutes, he would pause to check on her, offering a reassuring smile or a quick hug. The sound of the doorbell broke the relative silence. Ryan's brow furrowed as he approached the door. Visitors were becoming a regular occurrence, some supportive, others intrusive. Peeking through the peephole, he saw David Peterson, the former police officer who had offered his help at the vigil. Ryan opened the door. "David, come in." David stepped inside, carrying a folder that seemed ready to burst with papers. He placed it on the table, his expression grim. "I've been digging through my contacts and old records. You're not going to like what I found." Ryan gestured for him to sit. "Let's hear it." David opened the folder, revealing a collection of internal memos, incident reports, and whistleblower complaints. He pointed to one report in particular. "This is from 3 years ago. Denton was involved in an excessive force incident against a teenager. The case was buried under claims of insufficient evidence, but the victim's family reached a quiet settlement." Ryan's jaw tightened. How does someone like Denton stay on the force with a record like this? David sighed. It's not just Denton. It's the system. Officers who bring in arrests, regardless of the methods, are often protected because they make the department look effective. Complaints get swept under the rug, and victims are silenced. Ryan flipped through the documents, each page deepening his outrage. This isn't just about Denton. This is a culture of impunity. David nodded. Exactly. And the only way to break it is to shine a light on it. That afternoon, Ryan met with Anthony Vega to discuss their next steps. Anthony was already preparing the legal case, but they both knew the fight wouldn't be won in the courtroom alone. Public pressure was a powerful tool, and the growing movement behind Lily's story was their greatest asset. Anthony leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his notepad. The evidence David's provided is compelling, but we need more. We need testimony, witnesses, people willing to go on record about the department's practices. Ryan rubbed his temples, exhaustion creeping in. People are scared, Anthony. They don't want to risk their livelihoods. That's why we need to lead by example, Anthony said. If we show people that standing up makes a difference, others might follow. Ryan nodded, though he knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Let's start with the victims in these reports. Maybe we can convince them to speak out. The first person Ryan reached out to was Maria Gonzalez, the mother of the teenager assaulted by Denton 3 years earlier. She was hesitant at first, her voice cautious over the phone. We tried to fight back then, Maria said, but they made it clear that it was our word against theirs. The settlement was the only way we could move on. I understand, Maria, Ryan replied, but things are different now. The world is watching. If we work together, we can hold them accountable. There was a long pause before Maria spoke again. Let me think about it. Over the next few days, Ryan contacted other victims and their families, each conversation a delicate balance of empathy and encouragement. Some were receptive, others wary. But slowly, a few began to agree to share their stories. Meanwhile, the police department was scrambling to control the narrative. Chief of Police Harold Redding held a press conference, his tone measured but defensive. We take these allegations seriously, Redding said, his eyes scanning the room full of reporters. An internal investigation is underway, and Officer Denton has been placed on administrative leave. We ask the public to remain patient while we conduct a thorough review. The response was met with skepticism. Reporters peppered him with questions about the department's history of misconduct and the lack of transparency in prior cases. Redding's answers were evasive, fueling public doubt. Ryan watched the press conference from his living room, his fists clenched. They're trying to buy time, he muttered, hoping the public will lose interest. Lily, sitting beside him, looked up. What happens if they don't listen, Daddy? Ryan turned to her, his expression softening. Then we make them listen, sweetheart. We don't stop until they hear us. That evening, Ryan received an unexpected call from a young officer named Kevin Morales. Morales had been a rookie under Denton's supervision and had witnessed the toxic culture firsthand. I can't stay silent anymore, Morales said, his voice trembling. I saw what he did to your daughter, and I've seen what he's done to others. It's wrong. Ryan's pulse quickened. Kevin, if you're willing to testify, it could make all the difference. I want to, Morales said, but I'm scared. They'll come after me. I won't let that happen, Ryan assured him. You have my word. Morales hesitated, then sighed. Okay, I'll do it. The following week, Ryan, Anthony, and David organized a town hall meeting. Held in the community center, it was packed with residents eager to voice their frustrations and demand change. Victims and their families shared their stories, their voices shaking with emotion, but resolute in their determination. Kevin Morales spoke last, his testimony a bombshell that left the room in stunned silence. I became a cop to help people, Morales said, his voice steady despite his nerves. But what I've seen in this department goes against everything I believe in. It's time we stop protecting bad cops and start protecting the people we're supposed to serve." The room erupted in applause, the energy electric. For the first time, Ryan felt a glimmer of hope. The tide was turning. As the town hall concluded, Ryan stood with Lily outside the community center. She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "Daddy, do you think we're winning?" she asked. Ryan knelt beside her, taking her hand. "We're making progress, Lily, and that's what matters." She smiled, her confidence returning. "Then let's keep going." Ryan hugged her, the weight of the fight ahead momentarily lifted by her unwavering spirit. Together, they would face whatever came next. For Lily, for the community, and for justice. The battle was far from over, but the foundation for change had been laid. And there was no turning back. Breaking the silence, the town hall had ignited something within the community. Over the following days, more people came forward, emboldened by the testimonies of victims and Officer Morell's brave admission. What had once been whispers in the dark now roared into the light. People who had long suffered in silence began to share their experiences, each story adding fuel to the fire for justice. Ryan was busier than ever. Between coordinating with Anthony, gathering evidence, and managing media inquiries, he barely had a moment to breathe. Lily, ever perceptive, noticed the strain on her father. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked one evening as he sat at the dining table, his head in his hands. Ryan looked up, offering her a tired smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a lot going on." Lily wheeled closer, her small hand reaching for his. "You're doing this for me, aren't you?" Ryan's throat tightened. He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm doing this for you, and for every kid who deserves to feel safe. We're going to make things better, Lily. I promise." That week, Ryan received an invitation to speak on a nationally syndicated news program. It was a rare opportunity to bring attention to the systemic issues in law enforcement, but it also came with risks. Critics had already begun painting him as a troublemaker, accusing him of blowing the situation out of proportion for personal gain. Anthony and David joined Ryan at his home to prepare for the interview. They went over potential questions, crafting responses that were both factual and impactful. Ryan was used to high-pressure situations as an FBI agent, but this felt different. This was personal. "Stick to the facts," Anthony advised. "You don't need to defend yourself against baseless accusations. The truth speaks for itself." David nodded in agreement. "And don't shy away from naming the systemic issues. This isn't just about one officer. It's about a culture that needs to change." The night of the interview, Ryan sat in a studio under bright lights, facing the host across a polished desk. The program's intro music faded, and the camera focused on him. "Tonight, we have Ryan Morrison, father of Lily Morrison, whose story has captured the nation's attention." The host began. "Ryan, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Ryan replied, his voice steady. The interview began with a recap of the incident and the viral video that had sparked a movement. Ryan recounted the events at the park, his anger tempered by a determination to stay composed. As the conversation shifted to broader issues, the host asked a pointed question. "Some critics have accused you of exploiting this situation for attention. How do you respond to that?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "This isn't about attention. It's about accountability. My daughter was assaulted by someone who took an oath to protect and serve. That's not something I can ignore, and neither should anyone else. If shining a light on this makes people uncomfortable, then maybe it's time we confront those uncomfortable truths." The host nodded, clearly impressed. "What do you hope will come from all of this?" Ryan leaned forward, his passion evident. "I hope for a world where kids like Lily can go to a park without fear, where law enforcement officers are held to the highest standards of integrity and respect, and where no one has to wonder if their voice will be silenced when they speak out against injustice." The interview concluded with a standing ovation from the studio audience, the response overwhelming. Ryan left the studio feeling both relieved and invigorated. The fight was gaining momentum, and people were listening. While the national attention grew, so did the pressure on the local police department. Internal memos were leaked, revealing attempts to downplay Denton's history of misconduct. Public outrage intensified, with protests outside the department's headquarters demanding transparency and reform. Chief Redding, under scrutiny, announced a press conference to address the situation. Ryan and Anthony watched the broadcast from Anthony's office, their skepticism palpable. "We take these allegations seriously," Redding began, his tone rehearsed. "As of today, Officer Denton has been officially terminated. Additionally, we are launching a task force to review our policies and practices." Ryan's fists clenched. They're throwing him under the bus to save themselves. Anthony nodded. It's a PR move. They're hoping this will satisfy the public and avoid deeper investigations. But the public wasn't satisfied. Protesters continued to demand a full independent review of the department, and the pressure showed no signs of letting up. Amid the chaos, Ryan received an unexpected call from Maria Gonzalez, the mother of the teenager Denton had assaulted years ago. "Ryan," Maria said, her voice resolute, "I'm ready to speak out." Ryan's heart swelled with gratitude. "Maria, this means so much. Your voice will make a difference." Maria agreed to give a statement at an upcoming rally, joining other victims who had come forward. The rally, held in the city's central plaza, drew thousands of attendees. Families, activists, and community leaders stood together, their voices united in a call for justice. When Maria took the stage, her words were powerful and unflinching. "For too long, we've been told to stay silent, to accept settlements and move on. But silence only lets injustice continue. Today, we say no more." The crowd erupted in applause, their chants echoing through the city streets. That evening, Ryan sat with Lily on the couch, the day's events playing on the news. Lily rested her head against his arm, her eyes half closed. "Daddy," she murmured, "are we winning?" Ryan kissed the top of her head. "We're making a difference, Lily. That's what matters." As the night wore on, Ryan reflected on how far they had come. The fight was far from over, but the tide was turning. The voices of the silenced were growing louder, and the cracks in the system were becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan knew there would be more battles ahead, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, holding his daughter close and drawing strength from her quiet resilience. Together, they would see this fight through to the end. Justice, accountability, and the road ahead. The city was alive with a new energy, one born of hope, and a shared determination for change. The rally had been a turning point, but Ryan Morrison knew the journey toward justice was far from over. The spotlight on Officer Denton's actions had illuminated systemic issues that couldn't be ignored. Public support for reform was growing, but so was resistance from those invested in maintaining the status quo. Ryan sat in Anthony's office the morning after the rally, a folder of new evidence on the table between them. David Peterson, the former officer who had become one of their strongest allies, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Anthony flipped through the documents, his brow furrowed. "This is damning," he said. "These internal memos show that Denton's behavior was not only ignored but actively covered up. They knew what he was doing and chose to protect him." David nodded grimly. "This goes all the way to the top. The chief knew. The department's lawyers knew. They've been complicit every step of the way." Ryan's jaw tightened. "We have to take this public. The people deserve to know the full extent of the corruption." Anthony hesitated. "We have to be strategic. If we release this too soon, they'll accuse us of trying to manipulate the narrative. We need to time it right, after we've secured more testimonies and strengthened our case." Ryan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The weight of the fight was heavier than ever, but he couldn't let it deter him. "What about the independent investigation? Has the city agreed to it yet?" Anthony shook his head. "Not yet. The mayor is feeling the pressure, but the police union is pushing back hard. They're framing this as an attack on law enforcement." David interjected, his voice firm. It's not an attack on law enforcement. It's an attack on corruption and abuse. If they can't see the difference, they're part of the problem. That afternoon, Ryan received an email from a journalist at a major national publication. The journalist, Stephanie Torres, had been following Lily's story and wanted to publish an investigative piece on the broader issues within the department. Ryan arranged a meeting at a quiet cafe, bringing Anthony and David along. Stephanie arrived with a notebook and recorder, her eyes sharp and focused. "I want to tell the whole story," she said after introductions were made. "Not just what happened to Lily, but the culture of misconduct and cover-ups in this department. People need to understand that this isn't an isolated incident." Ryan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We're in. But this has to be about more than exposing the truth. It has to lead to action." Stephanie smiled. "That's the goal." Over the next week, Stephanie conducted interviews with victims, community members, and whistleblowers. Her article, published under the title "A Department in Crisis: The Truth Behind the Badge," quickly went viral. It detailed not only Denton's actions, but also the department's pattern of shielding problematic officers. The piece included quotes from Kevin Morales and other insiders, painting a damning picture of systemic failure. The fallout was immediate. The city council called an emergency meeting, with hundreds of residents packing the chamber to demand accountability. Ryan attended with Anthony and Lily, sitting near the front as speaker after speaker took the microphone. Parents spoke of their children's fear of the police. Community leaders demanded reforms, including an independent oversight board and mandatory de-escalation training. Kevin Morales, the young officer who had testified at the rally, stood bravely and shared his experience once again, emphasizing the need for change from within. When Ryan's turn came, he approached the microphone with Lily at his side. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "My name is Ryan Morrison. I'm an FBI agent, but more importantly, I'm a father. My daughter Lily is the reason we're here tonight. She's the reason this conversation is happening. But this isn't just about her. This is about every family that has been hurt by a system that protects abusers instead of the people it's meant to serve." He paused, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We're not here to destroy law enforcement. We're here to rebuild it into something better, something worthy of the trust we place in it. That starts with transparency, accountability, and a commitment to justice." The room erupted into applause, and chants of "Justice for Lily" filled the chamber. The council members, visibly moved, promised to take immediate action. The next day, the city announced the formation of an independent oversight committee to investigate the police department. The committee would include civilians, legal experts, and former law enforcement officers like David Peterson. Officer Denton was officially charged with assault and misconduct, and several other officers implicated in the cover-ups faced disciplinary action. For the first time, Ryan felt a glimmer of vindication. Progress was being made. As the weeks passed, life began to return to a semblance of normalcy for the Morrisons. Lily resumed her routine, her laughter slowly returning as she found joy in small moments again. Ryan, too, allowed himself to breathe, though he knew the fight was far from over. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily turned to her father. "Daddy, do you think things will really get better?" Ryan smiled, pulling her into a hug. "I do, sweetheart. Because of you, people are listening. And because of you, they're changing." Lily beamed, her spirit as radiant as the setting sun. "I'm glad we didn't give up." Ryan kissed the top of her head. "Me too, Lily. Me too." The movement that had started with a single incident in the park grew into a catalyst for change. Policies were reformed, voices were amplified, and a community united in its pursuit of justice. Ryan knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but he also knew that resilience, determination, and love could light the way. And as he watched Lily, her strength and courage inspiring everyone around her, he realized that justice wasn't just about holding people accountable. It was about creating a world where every child, every person, could live without fear. It was a fight worth every ounce of effort, and it was a fight they would never stop pursuing.